Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Now on to The Cactus League, a novel. Jason Goodyear is the star outfielder for the Los Angeles Lions, stationed with the rest of his team in the punishingly hot Arizona desert for their annual spring training.
Do you want me to check the mic while you do the levels?
Well, I think it's just because it's close to the PA here, but it won't do that over there. And if it, I'll work on it. Anyway, okay. Jason Goodyear is the star outfielder for the Los Angeles Lions, stationed with the rest of his team in the punishingly hot Arizona desert for their annual spring training. Handsome, famous, and talented, Goodyear is nonetheless coming apart at the seams. And the coaches, writers, wives, girlfriends, petty criminals, and diehard fans following his every move are eager to find out why, as they hide secrets of their own. Anchored by an expert knowledge of baseball's inner workings, The Cactus League is a propulsive and deeply human debut that captures a strange desert world that is both exciting and unforgiving, where the most crucial games are the ones played off the field. Mitchell S. Jackson writes, "A debut? You've got to be kidding. The Cactus League reads like the work of a seasoned novelist. The way the tension ramps, the richly drawn characters. At the heart of this amazing novel is Emily's understanding of the crucibles faced by those both in the limelight and out of it." And can I just mention that in the book list review, starred review, somebody used the word gallimaufry. Have you guys heard this word? Gallimaufry? Is that how we say it? Yeah. Jumble, a medley. I just wanted to say that. Okay. Okay, and as J. Ryan Straddle writes, Emily Nemens' magnificent debut is a masterwork of great empathy and detail, uncovering the realms of incredible pain and beauty enmeshed within every level of America's pastime. If you love baseball, you won't put it down, and if you don't love baseball, you might by the end. Emily Nemens is the editor of the Paris Review. She was previously the co-editor of the Southern Review. Her work has been published in Esquire, N+1, the Gettysburg Review, Hobart, and elsewhere. J. Ryan Straddle is the author of the New York Times bestseller Kitchens of the Great Midwest, which won the 2016 American Booksellers Association Indies Choice Award for Adult Debut Book of the Year, the 2016 Midwest Booksellers Choice Award for Debut Fiction, and the 2016 Southern California Independent Booksellers Association Award for 2016's Top Novel. So it was in 2016. His second novel, The Lager Queen of Minnesota, was an instant national bestseller. I'm really excited. We're all very excited to have these two authors with us today, incredibly talented. Please join me in welcoming Emily Nemens and J. Ryan Straddle.
Hi, thanks so much for coming out on a weeknight. It's Los Angeles. It's not easy to get around. You could be home watching television. Instead, you're out here supporting literature and books at an independent bookstore. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Love that. Okay, one real quick question for you at the top. You were published in Hobart.
Yeah.
I love Hobart. They were my first publication.
So Hobart has an annual, I don't know if it's still annual, but the baseball issue where it's all sports literature, and getting a story into Hobart, into the baseball issue, I was like, okay, I can write a baseball book. If Hobart says you're doing this right, if you're in that conversation, keep going. Yeah.
Real quick, I got a question for someone in the audience. George Ducker, have you ever been published in Hobart's baseball issue? No? Okay, not in the baseball issue. Okay, just wanted he could be. All right. Yeah. I was published in that issue once as well. Yeah, love it, and I agree with you. That's a transom you want to cross as a writer of sports fiction.
Exactly.
Yeah. One other quick thing I want to talk about. I love this book. My God, I love this book. Please buy it. It's my favorite book of 2020. I read a lot. Yeah, my God, you're going to love it. All right, just had to get that, just want to say that first. Okay, I've heard that you're a longtime baseball fan. Mm-hmm. You grew up in Seattle, and were a fan of the Mariners during the Ken Griffey Jr. years.
Yeah, my dad is a displaced New Yorker. He grew up walking distance from Yankee Stadium. And so he moved to Seattle, I think the same year as Mariners. He might have seen the last few months of the Pilots. I'm not sure. But in any case, by the time I showed up, it was the Kingdom, it was the Mariners, and they had just drafted Griffey out of high school.
Yeah.
So I remember being 6 and watching him being 19 and just falling in love. I mean, they called him the kid.
Yeah.
Here, I'm a kid, he's a kid, everyone's a kid.
There's that identification you look for in media. Yeah.
And, you know, that was sort of the start of a really exciting time for the Mariners.
Yeah, Jay Buhner, Edgar Martinez, Randy Johnson.
Tino,
of course.
Omar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then Ichiro, eventually.
Oh, of course, Ichiro. Yeah. That's fantastic. And so there's a lot of baseball fans among writers, but not a lot of baseball novels, especially lately. So how did you decide that your debut novel would be set in the world of baseball, and why spring training?
Yeah, so I moved to Louisiana in 2011 to start a graduate program in creative writing, and I was trying to think about something, a big project that could sustain me for my graduate thesis and hopefully into a first book. And the first thing I wrote when I moved to Louisiana was a 78-word short story about the renovation of Yankee Stadium. And it was, you know, very auto-fiction-y in that my father took a chair from the 74 renovation of Yankee Stadium and hauled it around the country. We have one in our basement. There's one in the Smithsonian.
Oh, wow.
It was just this remarkable piece of Americana. I wrote this very short piece about it. It got published, and I thought, hey, this is really fun. You know, baseball is a sport. People write about it. Obviously, there's a long tradition of sports writing and reportage, but there's also this lineage of sports literature, and I like doing it for 5 sentences. Let's see if I can figure out how to write a book about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I like the structure you chose for your narrative.
Thank you. It's not unlike the structure of your first book.
Right. What influenced you to choose this structure? And were there also any baseball-related POVs you considered including but didn't, or wrote and didn't make the cut?
Yeah. So there are 9 chapters. Being a good baseball book, there are 9. 9 innings, 9 stories that are woven together in a meaningful way. You know, I started writing these as stories, as independent stories, all taking place at the same time in spring training in a particular season. But I realized, you know, there would be a lot more momentum if the first the first led to the second, led to the third, and if there were enough narrative strains and continuity between each chapter. That not unlike a baseball game, you know, each inning is a discrete unit, has its own arc, but together they tell a bigger story. And it took a long time to figure that out. But once it sort of snapped together, I can't imagine it being any other way. So I had at one point, you know, it's a small team. I mean, there's 80 people showing up trying to make the 25-man squad. I had a baseball writer tell me, or not a baseball writer, a retired manager was reading the book early, and he's like, you know, no team has more than 60 players show up. It's crazy to have 80 there. And I said, okay. And he's like, except for that one season where we had 100, and that was really crazy. And I said, so this is actually within the realm of possibility.
Right.
And there's something really interesting about having the higher stakes of the narrower gauntlet of getting from 80 down to 25.
Oh, yeah.
At one point, I had named all 40-man roster.
Oh, my God. I love it.
And girlfriends and wives for most of them.
Oh, my God. Wow.
And that was kind of a slog as a reader.
Sure.
There was too many pitchers.
Maybe there always would be, especially in spring training.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe, you could have that as an appendice in the paperback.
Maybe.
You know, have the 40-man roster listed.
Oh, I mean, I kept the list. Yeah. I kept it, okay. But I've also moved across the country, so I have no idea where that piece of paper is. All right. Yeah. All right. It was like all neurotic blue pen.
Oh, fantastic. I love it.
So,
Oh, I had a follow-up question now, but I forgot it. Yeah,
you were
based on
asking
that.
about who else got.
Yes. Oh,
who
yeah,
got
yeah,
cut.
yeah, yeah. Other points of view.
Yeah, I was watching all the news. Pitchers and catchers showed up last week, and I think the first and full squad practice was this week, and first games are next week. So I've been watching sort of all the feeds about spring training beginning. It's not a coincidence this book came out on February 4th. Like I wanted to sort of ride that wave, but I realized I totally forgot about the team semi that arrives with all of the gear. And I wish I had written about, there was a great Instagram story of like the Athletics pulling into Arizona with their semi. And I was just like, oh, shoot, I missed the truck full of bats.
Oh, yeah.
And all the Sannies and everyone's uniform. The equipment manager like makes a very brief cameo. There's only a little bit of Dorsey Payne, who's the manager. But a big part of there's a lot of the team, of course, but I was really interested in the concentric circles moving out from the team, and the concession workers and the organist are two
Lester
two
and
major,
Alex's mama,
two major players. But then thinking about sort of even beyond that, the regulars in the stadium, the people who are thinking about. Who are working nearby and sort of rely on that income of 1 million people showing up for the month of March. In that way, it's this major tourist engine. I didn't really write about any tourists, but there's probably a whole nother book of just all the stag parties and father-daughter weekends and and golf trips that are, golf and baseball.
Right. That occupy the same realm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I love about your book is more than a lot of baseball books I've read, it really gets into that unseen world that surrounds the world that we see on television.
Right.
And you populated that world with a lot of characters that you don't often see in baseball stories. And you also tackled class in a way that I don't often see books set within the world of sports at all, other than the occasional kind of Horatio Alger type athlete, like in this case, you talk about the disparities between, people working minimum wage, 100 feet away from millionaires, and it's really intoxicating to me, but also because you love these characters so much. And that's one of the reasons I love this book so much. It's so wonderful to read a book where the love for the characters is so evident. And I'm really curious to hear about how some of these individual characters came to be and why it was important for you to tell their stories. Yeah.
I was, starting to write this. Another thing that happened in 2011 when I moved to Louisiana is I was thrown into the deep end of SEC football. And watching.
Were you going to LSU?
I was. I was going to LSU. And so watching amateur athletes and sort of all of the fans and people who rely on the engine of collegiate sports to make a life, whether it means, make a paycheck. And those are the busiest days that, as a bartender across the street from from Tiger Stadium, or if it's, the social highlight of the year in terms of people tailgating starting on Thursday afternoon and, until they come through with the street sweeper on Sunday. So I was really interested in the motivations and the profiles of all those different people that care about sports. And they're not just millionaires. I mean, obviously athletes are at a major league level are making a lot of money being professional athletes, but for minor leaguers, there's a lot more economic vulnerability there. For coaches, on the opening chapter is about a minor league coach, and that's not a comfortable existence necessarily, especially if you're supporting a few generations of your family. I think writing about class, it's set in 2011, which is, it was, historically there was a new stadium, Salt River Fields, that opened that spring sort of on the eastern edge of Scottsdale. And Scottsdale and all of Phoenix had boomed so much during the housing boom and busted so hard during the Great Recession. And there was a lot of, sort of exurban neighborhoods that were on the verge of going feral, either because of underdevelopment or development that stalled, or people who had moved in and then, lost their homes to getting behind on payments. And I thought, the idea of this new architecture sort of rising like a phoenix, right? And having this new home stadium is a really right opportunity to juxtapose that against the housing crisis. And so the highs are high, the lows are low. In 2011 in particular, I don't know that we've moved that far past it. But to think about that, you're going to write about class. That's a really long way around to your
as long as it needed to be
question. But one of my earliest projects as an illustrator is I worked on a graphic adaptation of Studs Terkel's Working.
Wow.
Yeah, I got to collaborate with Harvey Picar, which was very, very
wow.
cool. He drew this little stick-figured script, in this pane there's a stick figure saying this, and the next pane there's a stick figure walking. But just thinking about all the different ways that Americans work and why is, the central thesis of that book. And, it wasn't a one-to-one I'm going to write about that in this book, but clearly it got under my skin.
It did.
And into the bloodstream.
It did, and it's better for it. It's a wonderful book for it. Speaking of, would you like to read an excerpt?
Yeah, sure.
Which character are you going to read to us from?
That's a good question. Maybe I'll start just to set the tone and sort of orient everyone towards this new stadium. The book has these 9 chapters, each of which is introduced by our narrator, an unnamed gentleman. And we can talk more about him after I read. Welcome to Salt River Fields, the newest spring training facility in Scottsdale, Arizona. Turn east off of Pima, drive down the fresh Boulevard Lions Way. You're flanked by parking lots so new they still smell like tar, their white hatching wet. Ample parking for the anticipated crowds already sold out for opening day. Note the median's plantings, environmentally sustainable xeriscape. Of course, this is 2011, and the club cares about our natural resources, is mindful of the perpetual drought in Phoenix Metro. A few Christmas cacti bloom, despite it being February. And here, at the terminus of the boulevard, is the centerpiece of the multi-field complex, the 12,000-seat stadium that will be the new springtime home of your Los Angeles Lions. Take it all in, the crisp chalk diamond, the ruddy arc of infield, the bright checkerboard of the outfield. It's not easy to grow grass like that in the desert. I offer a hat tip to the grounds crew and see out past the warning track and fence. There's the shock green tilt of a well-watered general admission lawn. Farther still, on the horizon, the ridge of mountains jutting into the blue like the teeth of some mile-high saw. Take note of the architecture, too. The exposed beams and brick, the slate-gray cantilevered canopy over a sunken seating bowl, the polished concrete rotunda and concourse. A classic-looking stadium. Timeless in design, some might say, even if it's anything but. Nothing is static. Not the bluegrass-ryegrass blend growing out there, not the architecture, not the angle of the sun hitting the seats. Not a man's career, especially not a ball player the first weeks of spring. His batting average, his ambition, his hopes, all is in flux. I'm looking towards Lions left fielder Jason Goodyear as I write this, coming off the Gold Glove and a close second place in American League MVP voting, coming off a possible divorce and a lonely drive across the desert in his busted old Jeep. But that feeling of uncertainty isn't reserved for all-stars and the freshly dumped. It could apply to any player on the squad, any coach on the bench, any man in the executive suite, any fan in the stands. I'm looking at his entourage, his agent, Herb Allison, his maybe wife, Liana, his favorite minor league batting coach, and the devotees who would give an eye tooth just to be near him. It's all up in the air. Here's the thing about baseball, and all else. Everything changes. Whether it's the slow creep of glaciers dripping towards the sea, or the steady piling up of cut stones, rock upon rock, until the wall reaches chest high, nothing is still. Sometimes change comes as quick and catastrophic as a line drive. Hear the crack of wood displacing a spear of leather, yarn, rubber, and cork. Watch how it pushes the ball flat and then just as quickly forward. The action springs the left fielder from his squat, and the man's metal spikes tear into the turf, kicking up tiny wedges of grass, sending them towards the sky.
Yeah, so tell us about him.
Yeah, so that is our Greek course. And, I started, those interstitial chapters actually started as a geological history of Arizona, thinking about the built environment and how much Phoenix Metro had changed. On one level, it was really monumental, but it's adjacent to this magnificent mountain range. And this is the hippie Northwest kid in me, but it's a beautiful landscape. And I think that recent interventions undermined that on a certain level. The way that humans have changed the landscape was really challenging, and I wanted to interrogate that and think about, writing about these new stadiums and pieces of monumental architecture to put that in perspective by understanding the place on which they were built. So I did a very deep dive into the geology of Arizona and had this piece of writing that had a different tone than, the close thirds of the rest of the book. Had this energy and momentum that felt different but necessary. And so I split it up and realized, oh wait, this is sort of mapping onto the history of the season, just in terms of, at one point the whole area was underwater, and then there were really tall mountains, and erosion happened, and rivers showed up, and just sort of all of the momentum and major shifts that happen over the history of a place are not unlike the way a team coalesces or doesn't. So I had my timeline, and for a long time, I didn't know who was talking, and I realized, but they were serving sort of as a Greek course, and I realized, 7 years into writing, the 21st century equivalent of this omniscient narrator that would come in and summarize and, be a bit foreboding, but also just try to catch everyone up, which is sort of how I think about a Greek course. That would be a journalist. That would be a writer who is trying to be objective, but of course is a human like all of us and has a subjective perspective on what he's watching around him. So I was thinking about that, and, it being the recession and watching so many local papers sort of hemorrhage the writers, having him be out of work, which gives him the time to really pursue this story in a dogged but slightly disenfranchised way, gave him an engine and a point of view that just felt right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Real quick question before we go on. I remember what I wanted to follow up on.
Yeah.
If you can answer this, who is the manager you spoke to? The one who mentioned not having up to 100 people in spring training.
Oh yeah, it was Sandy Alderson.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he's a friend of a friend, and
that's so cool.
He was really generous. I mean, it was between first and second pass, which is you're proofreading at that point. But I was like, I've really been avoiding getting all my baseball facts checked because I'm scared about it. I'm worried I messed it up or I've gotten something horribly wrong. I'm not a sports writer, except for the 2012 LSU football season where I was in the press corps, which was delightful. I'm not. I think I know my stuff, but I'd like to make sure. And he was really generous. He read it and he said, you're writing literary fiction. You're a woman. For certain people, those two things will make them skeptical of you. I don't want you to make a bozo baseball error that will, alienate readers. So let's get these things right. Wow. And there weren't that many things. Apparently you never, ever, ever call a major league manager coach.
No.
Don't do it. Don't do it. And there's a chapter which requires someone to throw a complete game in spring training, which also never happens. But I was like, listen, this is a very dramatic moment. It's important for the narrative that, we go really off script in terms of what a pitching coach would let a young arm do.
Right. Just so long as it's acknowledged that it's off script, like in the text. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Awesome. All right. So take us back a little further. How do you go from growing up a Mariners fan in Seattle to becoming the editor of the Paris Review and now a debut novelist?
Yeah. It gets weirder because I was an art history major in college, and I think in a certain way that helped me prepare to write the book, because so much of, at least the art history I get most excited about, is thinking sort of about cultural movements, understanding why they resonated at that moment, looking back at the history of art, looking at a painting and thinking, what does that say about society at that moment? I'm not going to call a baseball player a painter, but I think the way we talk about celebrity and professional athletes says something about contemporary society. So my art history had helped a little bit.
Also, you mentioned earlier, doing working on a narrative project based on Suds Terkel that Harvey Pecor sort of storyboarded.
Yeah.
Now, did you do any narrative-related art as an undergraduate, or did any of your art have a specific narrative bent to it?
Yeah. I was living in Madrid in 2004. I did a semester abroad there, and which was great, studying art history, architectural history. The 20th century Spanish art is all about works produced in advance of and in response to the Spanish Civil War. Looking at Guernica every Tuesday afternoon. We had a class that met in the Reina Sofia, and that was also the year that there were those horrible train bombings in Atocha Station right across the street. So I ended up making a graphic novel sort of about being in Spain during that time, sort of thinking about the history of political art on the Iberian Peninsula, versus juxtaposed with this experience of sort of living through a moment of political turmoil and political violence. So, yeah, sorry, that's a little heavy.
That's all right. Was it working on that project that inspired you to go to LSU to study writing? Or, like, what point did you decide, I'm a novelist and not a graphic novelist?
Yeah, I was writing all the way through.
Okay.
Actually, I have a friend here in the audience, and we were in a writing group when we were, baby writers at 22. We're going to write books. And I was trying to write all through my 20s, living in New York the first time, but didn't really have the focus or the skill sets I needed to do more than what it felt like. I was trying my hardest to take myself seriously, but I didn't feel like I had the toolkit I needed. So I was living in New York, writing a little bit, reading a little bit, and working a ton. I worked for the American Institute of Architects, which is probably why the ghost of Frank Lloyd Wright is in the book. But at that point, I realized I really wanted to reorient my creative life and move from Williamsburg, Brooklyn to Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
That's a hefty reorientation.
It was. Yeah. It was a lot. The humidity alone.
Right. And so, who are some people that were especially helpful along the way?
Oh, well, we talked about Sandy. He was in the ninth inning, you could say. When I decided that I wanted to write this book about sports, I realized I had a lot of catching up to do. And so in 2012, I took an independent study with the Shakespearean LSU's English department. And he was also the faculty athletic rep. So for anyone who knows about, collegiate sports, they're basically, the check on the athletic program, making sure that, best practices are happening. Nobody's copying off a master key across the football team, that kind of thing. And an important liaison between the academic departments and the athletic department. Which is to say that, me coming with a reading list the length of my arm and saying, I want to read these and think about how they could help my book. he was all for it. And most of our meetings depended on the season, but we're either in, at the PMAC watching basketball or in Alex's box watching baseball. And he'd just be like, so what'd you read? What'd you think? So he was really wonderful. My graduate, my thesis advisor is a story writer named Jennifer Davis. She was great. And then along the way, just a lot of helping hands. I started this 9 years ago, and so a lot of people have sort of encouraged me. A really lucky seating assignment. There's a big writing conference every spring called the Association of Writers and Writing Programs.
Oh, sure, AWP.
AWP. Yeah. About 12,000 writers show up. It's at these giant convention centers. It's very helpful and good outreach and kind of miserable. Is that fair? Yes. Yeah.
I think there's some
nods.
There's certainly some former AWP attendees in the audience.
And you want to protect your time and your space, and half the airplane going up to, in this case it was Minnesota.
Oh wow. I was at that one too.
We're writers, and I'm not it snowed.
In April.
I'm not usually one to make friends on a plane, and I was editing the Southern Review at the time, and I really didn't want someone to ask how to get into the magazine. When I pulled out this stack of manuscripts, so I'm holding my manuscripts like this, hoping he doesn't make eye contact, and he says, are you going to AWP? And I said, yeah. And it was a guy named Dan Hoyt. He's a writer who teaches in Kansas, but he had been a beat writer, a sports writer for a long time. And so AWP in Minnesota was 6 years ago.
It was 2014, yeah.
So I told him I was writing this book about spring training baseball, and he has been cheering me on.
Oh, that's so cool.
Since 2014.
Love it.
Just because it was not the smoothest road to publication, and he just believed in this book from that moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. Yeah, I mean, there's a story behind almost everybody that's in that acknowledgement section in the back of a novel, and I often say when I look at my own novels, I wish there could be 20 names on the cover, because I sure didn't write this book alone. Yeah, I love talking to other writers about that. So since you joined the Paris Review, what writers have you discovered, or what writers have been introduced to you through working on that magazine that you're excited to talk about, that maybe have books coming out?
Well, you might be embarrassed by this, but I would like to have everyone give a round of applause to Jonathan Escoffery, who's back there.
Oh.
Jonathan, we published a story from him last summer, and it was part of our submission for the National Magazine Award for fiction, and we found out last week we won.
Oh, awesome.
So,
yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the beautiful, beautiful story. Another piece of that submission was Kimberly King Parsons' story, Foxes, and her debut collection came out in paperback, I guess in August or so. I don't know if people picked up Blacklight, but it's a beautiful collection. That was great. Amy, somewhere here. There's another contributor to the magazine in the next issue.
I love it. That's so sweet. Has the book tour given you the opportunity to connect with some contributors?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
So nice.
I have a rental car. I'm sort of zipping around LA on this trip.
Sweet.
Yeah. Also, I mean, it's young writers, and that's exciting. I'm also really excited. The next issue comes out in, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks. And one of the interviews is with Nathaniel Mackey, who is a poet, an elder statesman whose work I've really admired as someone who is interested in, he's an epic poet and writes a lot about music and about jazz, and, feels slightly, I think, difficult or challenging in terms of writing epic poetry with a lot of reference across several media, not just literary reference, but musical ones. And he just gave this really generous interview that I think for people that know his work and love it, sort of fuels the flames of that, but also makes his work accessible and, offers an entry point into this really important but underappreciated writer.
Awesome.
So that's March 10. But, you know,
Okay.
the current issue has the George Saunders interview, which
Oh,
is
fantastic.
which is just, you know, what a generous guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love that dude. I remember when he read here, maybe 10 years ago now. I came with a buddy of mine who was a bookseller in Venice at Small World named Jamie. And he asked, is Jamie in the audience? And Jamie raised his hand and he said, George Saunders told him, I'm taking you out for a beer because your bookstore has sold more copies of my latest book than any other book. And I know it's because of you. I know it's because you put it on an end cap. Your hand's selling it. I want to take you out.
Oh,
He's
wow.
that kind of writer that wants to take booksellers out for beer after the event. I love that. Yeah. Really sweet man. All right, 2 more questions and then we open it up to the crowd. Are there any other books you've enjoyed recently that you'd like to see more people reading?
I shared a pub day with Gabriel Bump.
Oh yeah, I was on a panel with him
Everywhere
at
You
BEA
Don't
last year.
Belong. It's
Awesome
great.
guy,
I
really
don't know.
nice
Have
guy.
you read that?
Oh, I haven't read.
No, I mean
Yeah.
it just came out.
Yeah,
It just
yeah.
came out, and I don't want to be dethroned as your favorite book of 2020,
Oh,
but
well.
it's really really good. I really enjoyed that one. I read in a kind of funny way because for the magazine I'm reading, stories as soon as they're finished, but then also for serial things that are like 9 months out, and then also like deep dives into retrospective stuff. Like we're working on the Rachel Cusk interviews in the next
Fantastic.
issue, and so that's how I spent Thanksgiving break, was just 10 inches of Cusk, just sort of reorienting.
That's
so
great.
I'm trying to read stuff coming out every month just so I sort of understand what's happening in publishing, but
Yeah.
that's sort of third in line.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. And finally, what's something you love about baseball, or something you learned about baseball that you couldn't quite fit into this book?
Well, I think this last week with all the controversies, Jason has his foil. He's got an off the field problem, and that was enough to sort of provide the engine for the story, but just watching how athletes are responding to one another and sort of the interpersonal conflict of the teammates. I mean, there's some of that in the book, but I feel like I could have written a whole nother book about just sort of betrayal between athletes.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's not fantastic.
Well,
I mean,
no,
it's a
I mean
real
it's
bummer.
fantastic that you have a whole book within you that you could have written,
I
or you
could have
could also
written.
write.
Right.
Yeah.
He's not cheating. He has another vice, but
Right.
it's been a lot to watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Emily Nemens, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Let's hear from you folks. What do you have to ask her? Oh, yes.
I'm suspicious of coincidences, but I just started Bish Jen's new book.
Yeah.
It's also about baseball.
Also came out on February 4th. Also has a blue cover.
Oh, boy.
Well, I'm wondering, I recognize that the evolution of yours began earlier, and you talk a little bit about exploring issues of class and things, but is there something about baseball that really lends itself to explore issues beyond literal aspects of the game in a time of, we'll just call it, political turmoil?
I mean, I think that baseball is such a sort of its primacy or its prime moment. I think it's still America's pastime, but it was particularly so at this mid-century moment where a lot of things about American culture were idealized, and so in that way, it's helpful to bring it back. I read Gish's book and really enjoyed it, but in that case, it's relying on this sort of pure example of Americana in a dystopian society or a dystopian moment, and leaning on that juxtaposition to sort of make the engine go. A theme of my book is sort of the possibility of renewal and the generation of spring as this moment of birth, and rebirth, but also acknowledging that everyone ages, and that there is something of a slow decline happening for almost everyone in the book. I mean, there's a few young players that are on their way up, but for many of them, it's either a slow slope or a steep one, and I felt like that's at least in sort of the discourse around baseball versus football that's been happening as well. As the market shares go down and up respectively. Does that answer your question? Yeah. A little.
And it is, although arguably hers is set in a dystopia, and if this is in real life, so is yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Happy ending. Yeah. Yeah, I can. I mean, it's not. Yeah, I can. I'm a little bashful about it because you want to just come out of the gate swinging. I think there's a real pressure with debut novelists to, publish young and strong and get it right the first time. But, when I graduated from LSU, I had a story collection that was many of these same characters. Like I said, they were not particularly talking to one another. They were all in the same place at the same time, but it was not. But that was it, full stop. And I got an agent overnight at a really good agency who called me up and said, I don't know what a leadoff is, but I love this book. And so, for me, that's also been a really important thing for me to do, is write sports literature, but have it be accessible as a piece of literary fiction. So I was really excited, really headstrong, really ready to go in 2015. And, we went out as a story collection that year and couldn't sell it. And I took it back. I spent a year drawing cartoons for the New Yorker, or trying to get into the New Yorker, and eventually sold one after about 6 months. And so it wasn't a whole year, but like after 6 months, I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and look at this again and see if I can make this a book or make this a better book. So that's sort of when, it felt a little bit like, breaking the spine and reorganizing things. And, for a while it felt like Frankensteining it in a scary way until it felt natural to reorient things around this star athlete, to put them on the timeline of the spring season and understand one thing does need to happen before the other, or if they're happening concurrently, you need to do that elegantly. So that was just, another 2 years or so.
Yeah, and you found Emily Bell.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Emily Bell was my editor at FSG, and she just got it. Once it was a book again, or a novel rather than a story collection, we went out to market, and she preempted it, which is publishing talk for someone getting on the phone and saying, I love this book, I understand it, I want to help you make it even stronger. Let's go.
Right. I want it more than anyone else.
I want it more than anyone else.
Yeah.
And she did. And she gave me some really good notes about sort of how to get it over the finish line. I didn't agree with all of them, but, I think that conflict, or that difference of opinion, sort of made me push for the things I cared about even more.
Yeah.
So that's the bumpy road.
Right here in the second row.
Yeah. No, he was sort of part of that regeneration. I had the geology and the history of the place. And when I sort of broke that up across the book, I realized, that wasn't a distinct voice, but I didn't know whose voice that was. And it took a lot of sort of trying things out and soul searching to realize that's the narrator, and the narrator is this out-of-work journalist. He does, yeah. Yeah, he's been getting beat up a little bit in the reviews.
Well, they always got to pick one thing,
I know. And I mean, it's the most meta thing, to have a Greek course that's a out-of-work journalist.
Maybe it's too close to home.
Yeah, can see the future. I mean, he doesn't see the future, but he has his hunches. He has his leads, and that's very helpful in terms of storytelling as well. Poor guy.
Right.
But I'm glad he's there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes. There's a pivotal moment in it. Spring is the beginning of the season. I didn't want it to have sort of a very terminal end. I felt like the ambiguity of leaving things open-ended, pointing towards renewal and regeneration felt right. It was really important to me. It happened outside the stadium, with Jason, making, this athlete perform outside of his comfort zone, away from the field. I knew from the very beginning. I just didn't quite know how to get them there. I feel like I sort of spoke obtusely because I don't want to give away the ending, but yeah.
Yeah, right there.
Some of the stories feel like they were such intimate glimpses into very particular worlds. Did you do a lot of research, or was it just your imagination? Like, how did you get those narratives?
It was both and all. It was a lot of. I'm a fiction writer, and so it was getting really close into the heads of these people, thinking about what would they do. The first chapter is told from the perspective of a 60-something's batting coach, and one of the best compliments I've gotten about the book is I was at a party wearing a dress and heels, and an early reader came up to me and said, "You're such a good old man." And, for me, I think probably because of the oral history being, an early project for me, other people's voices, other people's stories, I'm not going to say it comes naturally. It's still really hard work, but it's a thing that I love doing. So that part was the fiction writer trying to get closer and closer. But there was a lot of research. I wasn't in the locker room per se, but I was reading a lot of accounts of locker rooms, watching a lot of documentaries and games and reality TV, sort of every permutation of this moment in sports culture.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, in the back, yes.
I don't know if I got any specific lessons from this, but the Universal Association of Baseball.
By Robert Coover.
Yeah, that's
a lovely book.
Wonderful book. I mean, it's like fantasy before there was fantasy, and just wild. That one was good. I had always liked McPhee, but I was reading his early profiles of Bill Bradley and other. And I just sort of went down a rabbit hole of this very narrative reportage where, it reads almost like fiction, but he's got every detail of a place and a person woven into the narrative. And so that was sort of a North Star the whole way through the project.
That's cool. You also mentioned the Seattle Pilots earlier, so I have to ask if you read Jim Bouton's book.
No, I didn't. I know of it, though.
You should. You'll love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Maybe one more question, if there is one. All right. Let's call it a night then. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wait. Did you have one? Oh, sorry. Okay. I don't want to leave anyone out. All right.
Not firsthand. If anyone likes Chapter 6, I would encourage you to follow the WAGs hashtag on Instagram. The sort of culture, it's a lot more complicated than the way it's presented, on social media. But sort of the peacocking and the expectation of sports spouses, the wives and girlfriends, to present in this particular way was fascinating, upsetting, complicated, and so it was some of that. It was watching like the whole Sports Wives reality franchise, baseball, basketball, thinking about that as well. So yeah.
All right, thanks so much for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.